My dream was always to get my own place. Ever since I was in high school, I really could not wait to move out because I hated my dad growing up and my mom was not much better. We would always butt heads, and my dad would always be drunk on the weekends, and honestly, it was just a mess. As I got older and girls obviously became a factor, it became even more of a problem because there was no way I would bring any girls back to that household. So, because of all this, I took the first chance I could get and moved out when I was 19 in college. I went to a commuter college not far from home. My parents would not pay for me to go away to school, so I was on Zillow, Facebook, and Craigslist every day for a while. And when I finally found a rental that looked promising and affordable, I went to see it right away. The layout is pretty important, so I will describe it now. As I walked in, I was welcomed with the living room and dining area, which was one open space. Then there was the kitchen adjacent to that, which was separated by a wall. Then to get to the single bedroom, you went down the hallway, which also had two closets. One which I used as a pantry and one as a storage closet, and then the door to the bathroom. At the end of the hall was the bedroom. The bedroom was generously sized. It fit a queen-size bed easily. It had two more closets, and I fit a couple of dressers and a television in there easily. I was sold immediately, especially because it was budget-friendly. I moved in the next month, and life was fine. Fast forward a few months, maybe. I went out with friends in town, and we ran into some girls we knew. I ended up taking this girl home that I had known for a while through school, but we had never hung out in that way. I will just call her Sammy. We ended up drinking at my place and watching a movie, but that was really all we did. She did not want to take it further than that on our first time hanging out, and I respected that. We ended up in the bedroom, finishing the movie that we started in the living room, and I think we both just passed out from being drunk somewhere through the movie. The next thing that happened was I woke up to footsteps outside in the hallway. It was still the middle of the night. I looked to my side, and I was alone in the bed. I jumped out of bed looking down the hallway, and I saw Sammy in the living room grabbing her stuff off the couch. But she was doing so quietly. She was trying to leave now to avoid the awkwardness in the morning, and I understood that. So I did not say anything and went back to bed quietly. I heard her eventually walk out the front door. For good measure, I called out Sammy to no response, and that confirmed she was gone. I got comfortable in bed relatively quickly and drifted back off to sleep. It was probably another hour that passed when I woke to something loud. I immediately sat up in my bed and my heart started pounding relatively quickly. I called out Sammy again. There was no response. I was honestly kind of scared to get up and check. So, I picked up my phone and texted Sammy's number asking if she was still in my house. I looked at the door, which was still open because I was too lazy to get up and shut it after Sammy left. I was definitely still a little drunk from the shots we were taking in the living room, but I felt like I saw something wrapped around the door frame. My breathing only intensified. I still can't believe I had the balls to do this, but I swiped down on my phone to reveal the control panel thing and I pressed the flashlight button. And with the phone still pointed at the door frame, I realized there were two hands wrapped around the door frame. But as if responding immediately to being revealed, whoever's hands they were tightened and then pulled back out of sight, and the scream I was holding in for those 3 seconds finally came out, mixed with simply screams of dread. I also screamed for them to get out over and over again. By the time I finally got up, I looked down the hallway. It looked empty. I flipped on the light immediately. After a few minutes of calming my breathing and just trying to listen for sounds, I built up the courage to check the hallway closets and bathroom, and they were clear. I then moved to the main living area, and trust me, there were not any places to hide in there. I held my phone as if it were a gun, as I crept to the nearest light switch and turned it on. I felt instantly better when the living space was lit up, but there was still the kitchen. I crept to the opening that led to the kitchen and flicked that light on as well, finally lighting up the entire apartment. There was no one here. I looked behind the couch. I looked under the tables. I even checked the floor-level kitchen cabinets. When I realized it was clear, I ran to the front door to lock it. The weird thing though was that I never heard the front door close, and yet there was not a single soul except for me in there. I now tried calling Sammy repeatedly until she picked up. When she did, she sounded tired and confused. I asked her if she was just in my house, and she told me she left a while ago because she could not sleep. I did not explain. I just told her my bad. I thought I heard a noise and then we hung up. I decided to spam call my best friend until he picked up, also sounding tired and confused. I explained everything that just went down, and he said he could tell I was still drunk. His explanation calmed me down though. He said I was sleep deprived and still drunk, and I had a mid-wake up hallucination. It made a little sense actually, considering I never heard the front door shut. I eventually could laugh it off and went back to my room, shut and locked the door, and I actually calmed myself down enough to fall asleep. The next morning, I did another search around the apartment, and it was without a doubt clear, so I went on with my day. But at some point, I thought back to that supposed hallucination I had of those hands wrapped around the door frame the night before. I walked to my room and examined the door frame, and I think my heart stopped for a moment when I saw obvious fingerprints left in the exact positions the hands I saw in the doorframe had been. I felt dizzy coming to the realization that it was not a hallucination. I took a picture of it, which I still have in my cloud storage years later. I resorted to calling my dad for advice, and he more or less called me a buffoon for not locking the door. But as long as nothing was stolen and no one was there anymore, he told me to take it as a valuable learning lesson. Honestly, nothing my dad said on that phone call was untrue, and that is what sucks. I do not know who came into my apartment that night, and I do not know why they chose to do the literal creepiest thing they could have possibly done. But after my year-long lease was up, I moved on and upgraded apartments and never looked back. My parents' house never really felt like a parent's house, not in the normal way at least. My dad traveled for work constantly, and my mom was always out with friends or staying over my aunt's house. I know that sounds messed up, but it was just the reality. It was not like they abandoned me, but they were always busy and always somewhere else. So from the time I was like 16 and up, I basically lived alone. I ate dinner alone most nights and watched television alone. I would be the only person in the house for an entire weekend. I am an only child, and I think my parents realized after having me how much they valued their own freedom. So in that regard, I did suffer, which is something I feel more now as an adult. When I was younger, I loved it because it felt like freedom, having a big place to myself. I could do whatever I wanted without my parents breathing down my neck. I could bring friends over and play games late, or talk to girls on the phone without being embarrassed. It felt like having my own home without paying for it. And even when I turned 19 and went to a nearby commuter college, nothing changed. My mom and dad were gone or out more, and I was basically holding it down at home. I knew every noise that house made too. That part matters because it was not one of those houses where every creak freaked you out. It was an older but larger house, and it had its usual sounds. I always said the damn place had character. So this happened on a night where I knew I was going to be alone. My dad was out of town for work, and my mom was staying at my aunt's because they had a big family thing the next day, and she did not want to drive back late. She told me, "It is just you tonight," and I honestly did not care. That was normal. I told her she did not even have to tell me that. I made food, watched television, and did the usual. At around 11, I went upstairs to my room and started watching videos in bed, which was something I would do for hours. My room was at the end of the hallway upstairs. At the top of the stairs you had a small landing, then to the right was my parents' room. Further down the hallway was the bathroom, the linen closet, and then my room. I had my door open because my parents told me to keep doors open at night to listen for intruders. But I also liked hearing the house a little, like background noise. It made being alone feel less intense. I eventually started getting tired, so I shut my laptop and just laid there scrolling on my phone. So probably an hour passed from the moment I shut my laptop to when my phone rang. It said no caller ID on the screen. That was the first time I had ever received a no caller ID phone call. I stared at it for a second. To be receiving that late at night was sketchy as hell. I ignored it, but it rang again right after, still saying no caller ID. That is what made me answer. I figured if it was someone important, they would call twice. Plus, it is just a phone call. Worst case scenario, I hang up. So I picked up. At first there was no noise. I got nervous that it was a scam call, but then I started hearing something faint, and it took my brain a second to process what it was. It sounded like a television playing. What was weird was that I could also faintly hear my own television downstairs through the door because I left it on in the living room. I did not have it on loud, just on low volume, so hearing television audio on the phone instantly made my stomach tighten. I said hello a second time to once again no response, just the television sound. Like whoever was on the other end was not trying to speak. It was just there. Then I realized something that made me sit up in bed instantly. The television noise I was hearing through the phone was not random. It matched my television downstairs like perfectly. It was not delayed. It was the exact same audio at the exact same moments. Like it was synced. That is when I got this cold feeling down my spine, because there is only one way that makes sense. That would mean whoever was on the phone could hear my television in real time, as in they were inside my house downstairs. I tried to force a normal explanation, like a friend standing outside a window trying to trick me, or maybe the call was glitching and picking up my microphone audio. But the more I listened, the more I realized that did not make sense. It sounded like someone was calling me while standing in my living room.